Greetings to all. My name is Tatiana Kolavu. This is Stronger's version, the newsletter that I have on LinkedIn, but it's the live version, the office hours version of the newsletter, an opportunity for us to talk about specific topics and to bring in guests and answer a lot of your questions. I love doing this, and especially today, in a day where we talk about communicating across cultures and specifically having lots of ideas and tips if you are a learner of a new language, and maybe if you are trying to be effective in a new country, in a new culture. So I love to see we already have friends from Switzerland, from Andalusia. First time we've had someone join us from Andalusia, Montreal, Canada, Dubai, Belgium. I am originally from Athens, Greece. I'm coming here to you from Bloomington, Indiana, but my other foot and part of my heart is across the pond in Athens, Greece, and in Greece in general. So thank you so much for joining us. If you accepted this invitation in LinkedIn, I opened a course for you, one of my probably most popular courses called Communicating Across Cultures. And I must say, it's not a course that is very much in depth. There are two other courses that get a lot more in depth, and in just a little bit, we'll be able to share the specific links to those courses. But it's a course that I auditioned with back in 9 years ago for lynda.com. They brought me into the studio and said, "What do you want to talk about?" One of my big passions is communicating across cultures, and hence was born the name of the course. But I really lived this when several years back, my husband and our children, at the time they were 9 and 7, we visited Japan, Tokyo, Japan, and specifically Kobe, Japan. My husband was teaching there, and Japan is a high context culture, a culture where much of the meaning is shared behind the words that are said. Much of the importance is shared with the nonverbals. It's a very ceremonial, it's a very much a, I would say, emotionally reserved culture, but a culture that is different, but also similar to the Greek culture where I came from. So I thought initially this will be very interesting, another high context culture. And I didn't realize how much higher the context was. I noticed certain things. We lived there for a month. I noticed how intensely indirect the communication was. You never heard a clear no, except when you tried to use a credit card. This is a soft no, this is a hard no, where there was a very clear nonverbal communicated. I also noticed how important hierarchy and, I would say, a focus on ceremonial depiction of power and also respect. My husband being a professor, there was a lot of distance that was held between him and students in the way they interacted with them. Have to say our friends to hello to Dubai and Pakistan, Egypt, Maryland, and Brazil. So nice of you to join us. Other things that I noticed when we were in Japan was the time orientation. So again, a high context culture similar to Greece, but so much more punctual and specific, although traffic in Japan and parts of it are really crazy, and that does affect time orientation as well. So we can think sometimes that we understand a culture. High context cultures are ones that we said there's more to be read between the lines. Low context cultures are where things are very explicit and specific, and many times communication is more direct. The question is, how do we assimilate ourselves as the outsiders coming in? If we've lived in a certain culture for many years, how do we learn to flex from one side to the other? And I see a Brazilian living in Chicago. Daisy, I'm sure that you've learned how to flex your style. And also when you go back home, you feel at home. Absolutely. So the more you do this, I would say the more used to it you get. But when it comes to language, there are specific things that are difficult and sometimes tricky. Let me give you probably my most embarrassing story. I learned British English in Greece. And so many of the words, the lorry and the bus and the loo and the bathroom, are different. But I asked for a condom in my first English writing course. Yes. I turned around, I was holding my notepad, and there was a row of fraternity brothers This is I'm not assuming you know, this is the system of uh, groups of students that live together, and they have Greek letters. I was so lost when I first saw this. I thought, do they spell something? Is there a special meaning? So I turned around to the fraternity brother and I was writing and I said, would you happen to have a rubber? I said it with a British accent because at the time I had more of one. The entire row of brothers busted up laughing. I didn't know what I had said and what I did wrong. And I did one of those very nervous. And since then, of course, I've learned what the difference in the wording, and an eraser is the correct word. But I have also learned the hard way. And some of what we'll talk about here today is really an opportunity not to take yourself too seriously and not to be embarrassed, but to be patient and to be brave and to be resilient. Because when you are learning a new language, you are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. And I am seeing some of you here that in all the places you're coming with, but I'd love to know if you have transported yourself in a new culture, or you're brave enough to want to learn a new language. What is the most difficult part and aspect of it? I'll wait to see a little bit of your comments. One of the things that I did at a young age, I listened to music in English, the language I was learning, and I would read the words in the back of the album. I'm dating myself, but that was a while back. I would read the words, I would sing them, and that's what allowed me to practice. And later, because in Greece, all of our shows on television, when they were in English, you could see the subtitles in Greek. I actually realized that that was a really quick way of communicating, and it was translated for me. So it allowed me to be a lot more attentive. Ming, yes, the session has started. I'm not just babbling away. So that was one tip that I thought that was interesting and important. And now we have artificial intelligence tools where we can speak and the AI tool can translate what we say. And someone on LinkedIn user says, you're not the only one that asked for a rubber and it was an eraser. Yes, shameful. Good. I'm glad that I'm in good company, my friend. And there's other tips too that we shared quite often. But I thought that today it would be interesting to bring in some LinkedIn learners from around Europe. Actually, we landed in Europe, to share with us some of their strategies in becoming comfortable in a new culture, but also some of their tips for practicing and learning a new language. Before we do that, let me answer a question from Peter. Thank you so much. Difficult to learn Danish because you have to do it twice, reading and writing on the one hand, and the other hand, speaking and listening. I could not agree with you more, Peter. It's very difficult. And at times, maybe, depending on what type of learner you are, you learn to speak before you learn to write. I've tried very hard to keep up with my grammar. Jay, great to see you again. And Jay says, I don't care much about my mistakes. You're one of the brave ones. If people can understand what I want to communicate to them. So keep that attitude. And depending on what position you are, it sounds like you just put yourself out there and you practice. Another person says, music helps me a lot as well. I attended high school here. I didn't start to actually speak English till afterwards. Oh my goodness, I cannot imagine how it felt to be catapulted into an American high school not speaking the language. So as we get started, because this is office hours, and in my world, in teaching in the academic setting, I like to talk to students in office hours that want to discuss specific issues from a course, and that's why I opened the Communicating Across Cultures course. So I invited 3 learners that had made some comments in our classes, kind of pulled them out. And the first one comes, you'll see that there's a theme. We start from the northern part of Europe and start to come down. And I introduce to you my friend, Joergen, who is initially Swedish, but he is living in Switzerland. And Joergen, I'm going to brag on you just a little bit. Joergen speaks Swedish, English, German, Swiss, French, and Italian. I am holding 5 fingers up, and I am so impressed with you. We've already had our chat. but you started telling me a little bit about you work for an unnamed tech company, and for now we'll just keep it to that. But Joergen, tell us a little bit about your first few experiences in Switzerland from when you came in from Sweden.
Yeah, well, actually, I came in from the US, so that was kind of the transition,
Oh,
right?
that's right. That's right. There was the US in between. Yes.
Yeah, that was the transition. So I lived in Sweden up until my 19th year. Then I went to the US to study in college. That's where I learned, well, that's where I improved my English. I had a few experiences just as you did. In Europe, you learn the European English, the British English, and then you transition to the US and you have to learn again. And
Yeah.
it was kind of the same thing going to Switzerland then when I had to transition from the high German that I learned in school to the Swiss German that they speak here, which is very different. So same kind of the Danish situation again.
Absolutely.
You can read one thing, but you have to speak it. So yeah, but yeah.
So you were telling me that we talk a lot about differences in cultures. Some cultures are very task oriented. Let's get the work done. Let's get to business. And some cultures take more time in getting to know you as a person, sort of the relationship based cultures. And for you, you told me of being able to create connections. What were some of the things that you did to try to bring yourself into the context of your new life when you moved to Switzerland?
So I think one of the most important things for me was to get involved in the community in some way, and I did that by doing what I love, sports. So I got into a club and I started training first as a player, then as a coach, then as a trainer. So I went through that whole thing, and that really opened up a lot of conversations. And when you're in that community setting, people open up and they're more prone to correct you because
It's
you get
okay.
another.
Yes.
It's okay to correct you because yeah, you're not doing anything bad. You're just helping someone you know.
Yeah.
And
And do you find yourself that when you talked about playing ice hockey, you played ice hockey, you coached ice hockey, were you training your ear to listen to hearing different Swiss accents? Because obviously
yes.
it's a very different accent than what you learned in school. And you mentioned to me you worked with kids, and kids will be straightforward
They're
with you.
straightforward.
Say it again. Say it
Yeah,
again.
like why are you talking so strange? What is it? Why is your
What's
accent
wrong
so
with
weird?
you?
What's wrong with you? Yeah, you're like, okay,
Absolutely.
I did that wrong. I must have said something wrong now, and you pick up on that. You listen, and as you say, there's so many different accents in Switzerland. So, um,
Absolutely.
and
Well, one of the things that I like what you said is that you changed the context and you participated in a sport where it puts everyone in the same playing field. And then you said that people are more comfortable giving you a corrections, or when they don't understand they just tell you. What was it that made that important for you?
well, because a lot of times you don't get direct feedback. It's more like a weird look, and you're like, okay, well, what's going on? Did I say something wrong? Is the whole conversation going in the wrong direction, or did I just use
Yeah.
a wrong word? Right. So it's like, what's
ab-
wrong? And when you get
Absolutely.
that direct feedback, they're telling you, okay, you probably wanted to say this. Am I getting that right? And
Yeah.
it's more direct, and it's like
and
so
and it
it's
helps
easy.
you to know that that's a better word to use, for sure. You told me a really interesting strategy when you're learning a new language. Would you like to? I don't want you to tell it to tell it to our audience here. What's one thing that you do, because you speak five of them? So what's one thing that you do that helps you train in your new language? Maybe Italian is your new language.
Oh
How would
well,
you
yeah,
train
I
that?
haven't
Yeah.
done that yet. Yeah, no, what I try to do is pick up a book that I've already read in one language, and preferably if I read something in my native tongue, Swedish, find
Yeah.
it in the find that, and I know the native author would have actually written in the language I'm trying to learn. I'd pick up a book in that language and try to read it again because it's just reinforcing something I
Fantastic.
already know. And
I
yeah.
hadn't thought of that. So read the book that you already know where it's going and read it in another language. Did you ever think of also reading in a simpler book, or maybe a book that I always think of when our children were young. We would read wording in a different language when they were trying to learn it, and it was a little easier because the words were simpler. Did you ever go down a level to a more simple book in that language, or you just stayed at the same level?
Um, hmm. Well, I mean, I started with books that I've read in high school or stuff like that. So
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
you could probably say I did that. Yeah, just books that I've read up until I was 18, 19. So probably not
Sure.
the most complicated.
Great, great. So you didn't go for
No,
technical journals or something
no,
scientific.
no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
I want to bring what Jay is telling us here. He says, I'm now learning Polish because I want to create stronger relationships with the people I live with. When somebody tries to talk to me in Italian, I appreciate their efforts. I think that trying to talk in the language of someone else is a way to show you care more about the person. And for you, Jürgen, you've traveled around Europe quite a lot. Do you try to speak in the language of the host country, even if it's terrible? Or do you say, usually what I do is, do you speak a little English? I always try for a little, or I always get permission versus assuming.
Yeah, I try to. I struggle with Portuguese, but no, I'm not. I wouldn't try for too long. Like you, I'll ask pretty quickly if they understand English, and I can switch to English.
Asking for permission, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
If that makes a little difference, right? One of our other speakers says, I'm a Spanish speaker learning English every day as a non-native requires practice regularly. Yes, agreed. Lopez says, music and listening to the news has helped me a lot. When I'm not sure about a pronunciation, I search for the word and listen to the pronunciation. We have so many tools now. I asked my grandkids to correct my pronunciation, back to children being very transparent. Grammar has been challenging for me. I'm keeping my accent no matter what. Good for you, Lopez. I would say let's talk about speaking. We're not crossing over into writing because that's a whole other language and aspect. However, there's more tools to correct your writing and make it a little bit more helpful to do that. Many more tools out there. Well, Jürgen, thank you for staying up. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming to see me today and all of our conversation that we had before. So I'll say bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Take
Thank you.
care. Thank you. And as you just heard, practicing in the context, putting yourself out there with the language around you. And what one of our learners said specifically, if you're in a different country and you've moved with your family and you force yourself to speak a different language, only about an hour or two a week, some of our students do that. And the rest of the time you speak in your native language, it's going to be very difficult to pick it up. So this is something that our next guest, moving down from Switzerland, or maybe I should say further west to Germany, Orlando, who is a science, I don't want to say a science expert. Orlando told me that he does microfabrication. I probably want you to explain that in your new language of German. I'm kidding. I won't make you do that, Orlando. But Orlando lives in Germany and is from Mexico. So you talk about a big shift from one culture to the other, assimilating. And your wife, you told me, is from is your wife from Argentina?
No, she's from Venezuela. Actually, I saw
Venezuela.
a couple
Venezuela.
in the chat. Saludos a los panas.
That's right.
Y
Oh,
las
you have
panas.
your friends. Very nice. So adapting to that country and the different culture, you talk to me about using patience and being transparent. And then we'll talk a little bit about your fantastic tip that you had on learning a new language. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? And thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's a really exciting thing to have a chance to talk in this new tools that we have available. And yeah, about learning the language, I came to Germany without knowing German in the first place. So
Brave. Without
when
knowing German, went to Germany. Okay.
Yeah, the good thing is that I had time when I was studying to learn German, so I had this free time, you can think, to learn the language. And I think that the what I've heard so far about using children's books, talking with children is a really great gateway because they will be very direct, and they will always handle and work with very simple language, which is really nice and good. So you can build
Yeah,
your first blocks, and then you can start building from there.
absolutely. So you talked about bravery and not feeling self-conscious and just putting yourself out there. What context did you do this in when you first moved to Germany, Orlando?
Yeah, I think the first thing is first not knowing how to make your sentences, how to build the words that, or using the correct words. I think that's a big insecurity that many people have, that there is no language because you're essentially building it from the get-go. So you sometimes have to explain things in a way that is very unusual to people. So you would say, um, I don't know, like the slug with wheels to say the train, right?
Mhm.
And then people will be like, okay, I understand what you're trying to say, but of course that's something that will take a lot of energy to be
Yeah,
like
exhausting.
always
Yeah,
wrong, always making mistakes. So you go home and you're like, "Ah, I don't want this anymore. This is too much work."
yeah,
But I think it's a good way to start by allowing yourself to be wrong, to make mistakes, and then people will actually over time. That's something that Joergen was mentioning about which stage you're in. That people will be telling you like the mistakes you're making. At the beginning, it's a little bit too much. I
yeah,
think after you learn, you have the building blocks pretty much established. You can get these corrections, but you have to be direct and say like, "Sorry, I don't care about this. I would like to just talk," right?
yeah.
And
Just
try to
let
push
me
it.
be. But you have to be in a relationship with your friend. You mentioned a friend that you feel very comfortable with, and you continue to practice, and that has helped you because you feel a little safer in that space, right?
Exactly. It's always being with a person that will be supporting and understanding of your situation, like because they have also learned the language, a different language, which might not be your target. In
Hmm.
my case, we were leveled in English because I am a Spanish native speaker and she's a German native speaker. So she understood the insecurity that is trying to communicate with something. So
Yeah,
we were in this balance always, and I think
very nice.
that's a great thing to have someone that is in that same position as you.
When I asked you what was some of the tips, Orlando, that you use to understand the new culture and to also build your confidence in the new culture with the language, you mentioned TikTok. Do you want to share with our learners what is it about TikTok that has become a great learning tool for you in Germany?
Yeah, well, I learned of TikTok because of my wife. She's a big fan of the app. I didn't like it at the beginning, so I started using it and browsing and looking at
Mhm.
the content there. And there's a lot of English speakers, especially who are in Germany, who are trying to learn. And something that I was really feeling helpful in the beginning was that everyone was feeling the same frustrations as I was, right? So when
Great.
you're talking with someone and then problems with the public transportation, problems with the people from the offices, the passport, and a big
You're not
etc.
alone. Yeah.
But after some time, I think it's good to also develop some trying to avoid just getting stuck in this circle of always complaining, because in the end it's very safe, it's very comfortable, but you should allow yourself to also make mistakes, to move forward, and to do things in a way that will be developing yourself in the future.
And you talked a little bit about creating a understanding for the new culture you were in and getting more comfortable with how direct the German language and German culture was for you.
Yes, of course. I think the example with the kids is really really punctual about that. That children will be like, "But you're speaking weird, sir. Why are you speaking like me?"
I
So
wrote that about in my newsletter. There's no
then
hiding
you're
from
like,
kids.
you can tell them, "I am also learning," and they will be
Yeah,
like, "Ah, okay, that's funny, but I can understand," and they
you
will
speak
also be
funny.
very helpful. Yes,
I love
yes, they
it.
will be really helpful.
I love it. Back to, I just want to point out Omar's comment. We were talking with Jurgen as well of speaking or making an effort to speak to someone in their native language. And a Nelson Mandela quote that says, a native language speaks to a person's heart. I have to admit this, that when I speak with people in my native language, I feel at home. But if we're going to learn a new language and connect in a new culture, we have to be outside of our home and outside of our comfort zone. And that's what makes it tiring at times, exhausting, as Joergen said. It makes so much sense. But everyone is here today because they're on the same boat. And I can't thank you enough for applying and adding all of this time. I'm looking through a little bit of here, lots of conversations about watching TV and listening to music. I think I've hit a nerve there of trying to give specifics to everyone and what they do. Also, you create a safe space as you practice. I know
Yes.
German is not an easy language, and I commend you for being vulnerable and open to doing that, Orlando. So I'm really glad we found you.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm really happy to share.
It-
If anyone in the conversation would like to, have a chat with me on LinkedIn, I'm open for any
Sure.
questions you have.
We posted your handle. That's wonderful. If there's one lesson that everyone is learning now is don't comment on any of Tatiana's classes because she's going to grab you and put you in the class. But all of you wanted to be here. So I'm very grateful. Orlando, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. So far, learning from apps and understanding what another culture is is like, how direct they may be or indirect, or what's popular. Now that we have so much social media access, it's another great way to learn about a new culture or a country where we're visiting or we're living and we're working in. What we've learned and understood from Joergen and Orlando is that it's not easy, but it pays off tremendously. We are moving from Sweden and Switzerland to Germany, and now we're going to Italy, the furthest south that we're going to attend. And Roberta is one, all of you are staying up much later than you should probably to be part of my office hours, and I appreciate that. But it was such a pleasure, Roberta. You were the first person I spoke to, a professional translator, a high school English did you teach? You studied foreign languages. You speak German and Spanish. You speak Italian, and that's your native language, and English. Again, I feel like with two languages, I'm at a minority here talking about how to learn a new language. Tell us about your experiences with cultures and languages.
Hi everyone. In the first place, basically, I'm really inspired by what Orlando and Joergen said because I share much of their experience. For example, when Orlando was saying that kids told him that he didn't speak like them, I felt the same because sometimes you ask kids, or maybe you just want to say something to them because I don't know, maybe you meet a kid and you want to say something, and they immediately realize that you're not a native speaker. So they're like,
yeah,
like a spy. You know that you're going to recognize you.
busted. Yeah.
Yes, anyway, I guess it's both exciting and very, yes, frustrating, challenging to learn a new language, especially when you are like in the place where the language is spoken. Because, basically when you're, for example, in Italy, as in my case, and you're learning German or English, you never really perceive that you're missing so much. For example, that you really don't know any idioms, for example, in the first place at the beginning.
Oh goodness.
Or which are so difficult. Or maybe, for
Snake.
example, we say in Italian that sometimes we speak like books. So basically that's what I think. At first, both in English and German and Spanish, I just spoke as a book. So I was just speaking as my grammar book. So basically
Sure.
not native at
Yes,
all.
yes.
So I guess
street language, yes, like a book.
yes, and it's in the small things, I guess, because sometimes you realize when you speak to native speakers, you immediately realize that you've been saying something which is not so natural. Maybe it's correct, grammatically correct, it sounds good, but not natural, not native. So you immediately, if you
You sound
start
like an imposter.
Yes, exactly. And that's why kids can immediately realize you're not a
Yeah,
native
yeah,
speaker.
absolutely.
That's why, maybe. Yes. So
So
yes.
you were telling me, Roberta, that you noticed some of the biggest cultural differences, and I have a whole course on this of communicating across cultures virtually because we live in this world now where you can't read the room. You can't scan the air to figure out who's in charge, who's doing what, how do you communicate, and a lot of the nonverbals get taken away. And what are some of your strategies on the formalities or informalities that play out in virtual meetings that
Mm.
you attend?
This is like a lovely topic, and also a very difficult one, because, for example,
Lovely. That's a positive
lovely.
way of saying it.
I
Lovely.
love it.
Yes.
I love it because it's really, in this case, I guess it's so interesting and, well, lovely for me, because formality plays a very important role in the Italian business culture. So probably for an Italian, being with people from all over the world, or at least from Europe, can be challenging, but also a way to, look into other cultures.
Sure.
The thing is, when you are communicating virtually, you cannot make eye contact, because you never know where people are looking. So
Yes.
you're always
Yes.
a bit embarrassed. Moreover, you cannot really spark a connection, because, for example, maybe if you are in a conference room with other people live,
Mm,
then
mm.
maybe you can, I don't know, maybe begin with small talk, or just, smile at someone, while when you are in Google Meet, or, for example, in Teams, whatever, you cannot do this. So basically, my secret is to look up for people in LinkedIn, usually. So beforehand. Yes.
Beforehand. Okay.
Yes.
So do a little bit of your homework, and that's very
Yes.
helpful to you as well, too.
Also, because I really, I genuinely want to know what people do. I mean, for example, if you're meeting someone from a company, maybe they take care of, I don't know, for example, marketing strategies, but you really don't know their background, or, for example, if they speak another language,
Mm,
or
mm.
maybe if they're interested in a specific, for example, topic. I don't know, they wrote a dissertation about a certain topic. So I always Google them, or at least search in LinkedIn.
So
So
you
I
do
guess
your homework and you're specific. Yeah,
just to
absolutely,
know
too.
who am I speaking to, because
Yeah,
you maybe sometimes, for example, for Italians, titles are really important,
yeah.
but I noticed that usually people from other countries don't really, highlight that. So
Mm.
sometimes you don't know if you're, well, it's not so important after all, because the experience matters. uh, but still, maybe, you want to know whom you're
How to
speaking.
address someone. That's
I
important.
guess it's also a limit, because maybe in, Italy is has a high power distance. So maybe
Mhm.
sometimes I must admit, I would treat people in a different way if they were, for example, like the boss, like the
Sure,
big boss.
sure, sure.
While, for example, for Americans, it doesn't really work like that. So I guess it's
Yeah.
both, a characteristic, a feature, and a limit.
And an example of this, I was just talking to an executive from a company I'll be doing a training for, and they have people from the UK, from France and Italy, US. And in the UK, she was telling me that there is a formality, and people discuss, or the people that report to me, talking about my team and my people, and others that were less status focused would take that as he's showing off that he's the boss. And
Mm-hmm.
we were trying to talk about, let's create an understanding that in a higher power distance, that's kind of how people talk anyway. They're not doing it to show off or brag that they have a team or they are the boss. But and this was within the same company that was being translated, because I was asking of what are the miscommunications, or what are the conflicts too. One of our learners said, Daisy, and thank you for sharing, Daisy. I've made a couple of American friends here in Chicago. We share a lot of aspects from our cultures, and they also help me with pronunciation, vocabulary every time I need.
Yes,
Back
always
to
make
what
friends. Mm.
Jürgen said, that's when the person feels comfortable to give you feedback. Or when Orlando said he has made a friend of a person with a person that's also learning his language, and you develop a level of comfort in practicing or getting feedback, which is super, super helpful. But again, my friends, you have to put yourself out there. It's not just going to happen out of thin air. And we get impatient. From the research that I've read, we get a little less proficient with a new language when we pick it up in our later years versus when we pick it up when we're younger. So that's very different. So someone said here, deliberately putting yourself in a friend in a friend group. Oopsie, here I've lost you. What do you think of that? Deliberately putting yourself in a friend group of native speakers where I can't use my language to escape. I try to engage in conversation, even though I struggle and stammer made me learn the language quicker, accelerating my learning curve. Can't say that enough. And in the newsletter, when I talked about tips in the Stronger newsletter this month, I talked a lot about getting a service, a front-facing job where you have to talk to the public and you have to interact intentionally too. I'm curious, everyone that's attending, do you have any questions for our learners? What do you think of Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, and for beginners? I am a big, absolutely, Babel is another one. Babbel is another one. Anything that gets your ear trained, many of these have native speakers speaking the language. Wouldn't you say, Roberta, you're the linguist, the academic in this area? Is that a good idea?
Totally, yes. I would say it would be a great idea, but I'm still thinking about the comment. I guess Omar wrote it. He said that, that the native language speaks to your heart. And I was also thinking about what you said. So in the last comment, so a mix in my head. Basically, if you make friends in the language you are trying to learn, you will definitely learn more, because anyway it's like an empathetic relationship. So
Yeah.
the native speaker will definitely help you, because he or she is speaking his or her language, so of course they will want to help you because
Yeah.
it's spontaneous. And on the other hand, if you have friends from another culture, it will be spontaneous for you to learn the language. For example,
Absolutely.
one of my best friends is Mexican, and I have learned a lot from him. While, for example, in high school, Spanish for me was really, something I really wasn't interested in. So
Sure.
basically, yes,
But
relationships.
now,
Mhm, yes, because when you love someone, it's your friend, and it's something you really want to do. You need to do that.
I love it too. Wait, hold on. Robert shared an article too. This is going in our feed, so this is great. Intelligent, comprehensible, non-native models of ESL. Thank you for sharing so much. I appreciate that too. These kinds of cultural differences can be seen in Canada, where French Canadians, very true, use a more formal language. French has plural and singular, like Greek and Spanish. You don't have someone very well, you use vous versus. Those are the types of things that you learn, and you want to make sure you don't stick out like a sore thumb when you don't do that. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to be very cognizant of that, but hang on in the green room and we'll chat in just a little bit. But Roberta, thank you so much for your
Tatiana.
time and your ability to communicate some of this with all of your information and your experience in all the languages that you teach and you speak. So thank you so much for joining us.
Bye. Thank you.
So everyone, it's tough to be in a different culture and try to fit in. I have done it myself. Many of you are in the US, or you are in parts of Europe and parts of South America and the world from a different place. And our world is so much more integrated, where a lot of this will continue. On a positive note, I have to say, because of social media and because we hear so many other languages now, I remember how popular Money Heist was on Netflix, and it's a Spanish show where everyone had to go through the subtitles. But I do think there's better awareness and there's more understanding and empathy for crossing cultures and borders and trying to make an effort in another language, in another culture. So let's definitely be empathetic for one another, and let's continue to learn, and let's continue to stay out of our comfort zone if we want to grow and if we want to learn. So in this month's Stronger newsletter, I talked about tips for language tips for non-native speakers. And I love that some of you are English as a second language teachers and you're jumping in. I will look through most all of the questions and the comments and try to respond. But I want to thank you so much for participating. I want to say in May, I'll be in Greece for most of the month. But in June, we'll do a LinkedIn Live that will be like no other. It's going to be physical activity focused. We'll talk about ways to move, be energized, things to do to help you stay innovative. I'll write about that in the newsletter. But when you participate next time, I'm probably going to make you sweat a little bit. And I'll leave it to that. So thank you so much. Check out our newsletter. Check out me on LinkedIn. Thank you once again. Take good care all. Bye-bye.